The massive arena on planet Vortex Prime was like nothing anyone from Earth had ever seen before. The building was so huge that it could fit 10 football stadiums inside it and still have room left over. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that sparkled with different colors when the light hit them, making the whole place look magical and strange at the same time. Thousands of alien beings filled every seat in the arena, and the noise they made was incredible. Some of them roared like giant lions, while others made clicking sounds with their claws or tentacles. The air was thick with excitement and the smell of different alien foods being sold by vendors who floated around on anti-gravity platforms. In the VIP section, which was the best seats in the arena, sat a small human girl named Hannah. She was only 8 years old, and her eyes were wide with wonder as she looked around at all the amazing sights. Her father, Ambassador Kim, sat next to her, wearing his best diplomatic uniform and trying to look calm, even though he was just as amazed as his daughter. Hannah held her favorite stuffed animal tight against her chest. It was a small brown bear that she had brought all the way from Earth. The bear looked very ordinary compared to everything else in the arena, but it made her feel safe in this strange new place. She had never seen so many different kinds of creatures before, and some of them looked pretty scary. The crowd was mostly made up of 3 different alien species. The biggest group was the Sauroch, who looked like giant lizards that walked on 2 legs. They had thick scales covering their bodies and long, sharp claws on their hands and feet. Their eyes were yellow, and they had rows of pointed teeth that showed when they opened their mouths. The second largest group was called the hive minds, and they looked like enormous insects. They had 6 arms each and wings that buzzed constantly. Their heads were triangular, and they had multiple eyes that moved independently of each other. They communicated by making rapid clicking sounds that sounded like someone typing very fast on a keyboard. The third group was the strangest of all. They were called the Granite Lords, and they looked exactly like walking rocks. Some of them were small like boulders, while others were huge like mountains. They moved very slowly, and when they talked, their voices sounded like thunder rumbling in the distance. Ambassador Kim leaned over to his daughter and pointed at the arena floor, which was completely flat and made of some kind of metal that reflected the lights from above. He explained to Hannah that the floor could change into any kind of battlefield the computer wanted. It could become a jungle with trees and vines, or a desert with sand dunes, or even an ocean with real water. Hannah watched in amazement as the floor suddenly started to shift and change. Colors swirled across the surface, and then mountains began to rise up from nowhere. Within seconds, the flat metal floor had become a rocky landscape with cliffs and caves and narrow paths winding between tall stone pillars. It was like watching someone build a movie set, but 100 times faster. The crowd cheered and roared with approval as the transformation completed. They loved watching the arena change because it meant the fights would be more exciting and unpredictable. No one knew what kind of environment would be chosen for each battle, and that made every match different. From the last, a strange creature that looked like a giant jellyfish floated down from the ceiling and hovered over the center of the arena. This was the announcer, and its voice boomed through hidden speakers all around the building. The creature had no solid body, just a transparent mass that pulsed with different colors as it spoke. The announcer began to introduce the next match, and the crowd grew even more excited. They were about to witness something that had never happened before in the history of the Galactic Combat Championship. A human would fight in the arena for the first time ever. Most of the aliens in the crowd had never seen a human before. Earth was a new planet that had only recently made contact with the galactic community. The few aliens who had met humans before described them as small, weak creatures with soft skin and no natural weapons like claws or fangs. They seemed totally unsuited for combat. When the announcer said that Commander Vex of the Sauroch military would be fighting against a human representative, the entire crowd burst into laughter. They thought it was some kind of joke. How could a tiny, weak human possibly fight against one of the most feared warriors in the galaxy? Commander Vex was famous throughout the Sauroch Empire for his strength and cruelty. He had never lost a fight and had defeated warriors from dozens of different species. He was known for playing with his opponents like a cat plays with a mouse, making them suffer before finishing them off. He particularly enjoyed humiliating his enemies in front of large crowds. The crowd continued laughing and making jokes about the upcoming match. Many of them started placing bets on how quickly the human would be defeated. Some bet that it would be over in 30 seconds. Others thought the human might last a whole minute if he was very lucky. No one bet on the human actually winning. Hana looked confused by all the laughter and asked her father why everyone seemed to think the match was funny. Ambassador Kim tried to explain that the aliens did not understand how strong humans could be. He told her that they would soon learn that Earth people were much tougher than they looked. The announcer continued describing the match and explained that this fight would determine whether Earth deserved to join the Galactic Council. If the human won, or at least fought bravely, Earth would be welcomed as a member of the galactic community. If the human lost badly, it would prove that Earth people were too weak to deserve respect from the other planets. Ambassador Kim felt nervous as he listened to these words. He knew how important this match was for his entire species. If things went wrong today, it could mean that Earth would be ignored or even attacked by other planets. The future of humanity in space depended on what happened in the next few minutes. The doors at opposite ends of the arena began to open, and the two fighters started walking toward the center. The crowd fell quiet for a moment as they waited to see the competitors. The first door opened, and Commander Vex stepped out. Vex was enormous even by Sauroch standards. He stood nearly 9 feet tall, and his muscles bulged under his thick green scales. His claws were longer than kitchen knives and looked sharp enough to cut through steel. His yellow eyes glowed with cruel intelligence, and his mouth was twisted into a confident sneer. The crowd roared with approval when they saw their champion. He raised his arms above his head and flexed his muscles, showing off his incredible strength. Then he opened his mouth wide and let out a deafening roar that echoed throughout the arena. From the other door, a much smaller figure emerged. This was Day, the human representative. He looked ordinary compared to the massive alien warrior. He was average height for a human with brown hair and calm, dark eyes. He wore simple combat gear that looked plain next to Vex's elaborate armor. The contrast between the two fighters was shocking. Vex looked like a monster from a nightmare, while Day looked like someone you might see working at a construction site or shopping at a grocery store. The crowd started laughing again, even louder than before. But Hana noticed something that the aliens missed. While Vex was showing off and making noise, Day was studying his opponent carefully. His eyes moved constantly, watching how Vex moved and looking for weaknesses. He stood perfectly still and calm-like. He was solving a difficult math problem in his head. Ambassador Kim squeezed his daughter's hand and whispered that the match was about to begin. Hana held her stuffed bear tighter and watched as the two fighters moved toward the center of the arena. She had a feeling that something amazing was about to happen. The two fighters stood at opposite ends of the arena, and the difference between them was incredible. Commander Vex looked like he had been built for war. His massive body cast a shadow that covered half the arena floor. His scales shimmered under. The bright lights and every muscle in his body seemed ready to explode into action. Day, on the other hand, looked like he belonged in an office building somewhere. He had no fancy armor, no sharp claws, and no intimidating roar. He simply stood there, with his hands at his sides, looking completely relaxed. The crowd found this hilarious, and their laughter echoed throughout the massive building. Vex began his intimidation routine, which was famous throughout the galaxy. He flexed his enormous arms, showing muscles that were bigger than tree trunks. Then he extended his claws, which made a metallic scraping sound as they slid out from his fingertips. The claws were longer than swords and looked deadly sharp. The alien warrior started moving in, a display of speed and agility that amazed even the experienced crowd. He ran back and forth across the rocky terrain, jumping from boulder to boulder with ease. Every time he landed, the ground shook from the impact. His movements created small sonic booms that sounded like thunder. The crowd cheered wildly as their champion showed off his incredible abilities. Some of the Saurok in the audience stood up and roared their approval, while the hive minds clicked their approval, and the granite lords rumbled deep sounds of appreciation. Everyone was impressed by the display of raw power Vex, then began to speak using the Galactic common tongue so that everyone in the arena could understand him. His voice was deep and threatening, like the growl of a massive predator. He declared that he would crush the pathetic human like an insect to show the entire galaxy that Earth people were weak and unworthy. The alien warrior went into great detail about exactly how he planned to defeat Day. He would start by breaking the human's arms, then his legs, then finally his spirit. He wanted everyone to see that humans had no place among the civilized species of the galaxy. He called them pink-skinned weaklings who should go back to their primitive little planet and stay there. Ambassador Kim felt his stomach tighten as he listened to these cruel words. He had hoped that this match would show the galaxy that humans deserved respect. Instead, it was turning into a public humiliation. He looked around at the other human diplomats in their section and saw the same worry in their faces. Little Hana did not understand all the big words that Vex was using, but she could tell that the giant lizard creature was being mean. She had seen bullies before at her school, and Vex reminded her of the worst ones, the kind who picked on smaller kids just to make themselves feel important. The crowd was eating up every word of Vex's speech. They loved hearing their champion talk about destroying his opponent. Before the fight even started, many aliens in the audience began making even more bets on how quickly the human would fall. Some thought 30 seconds was too long and bet on 20 seconds instead. The arena computer selected the fighting environment and chose a rocky canyon terrain. This was perfect for Vex because Saurok were natural climbers who could scale vertical walls with ease. The terrain gave him every possible advantage while making things much harder for the human. Rocky pillars rose from the arena floor, creating a maze of stone formations. Some were tall and thin, like telephone poles, while others were wide and flat, like tables. There were caves and crevices everywhere, providing plenty of hiding spots. The ground was covered with loose stones that would make walking difficult for anyone not used to rough terrain. Vex immediately took advantage of the terrain by scaling the tallest rock formation in seconds. His claws found purchase on the stone surface, and he climbed faster than most creatures could run. Once he reached the top, he looked down at Day like a hawk looking at a mouse. The human remained in the center of the arena, standing on flat ground. He did not try to climb any rocks or find cover. He just stood there, watching his opponent with calm, steady eyes. This lack of reaction frustrated Vex, who had expected the human to panic or at least show some fear unknown to the crowd. Day was not just any ordinary human. He had spent years working as a construction engineer on Earth, building skyscrapers and bridges in dangerous conditions. He was used to working at great heights and in unstable environments. His muscles were strong from carrying heavy materials, and his balance was perfect from walking on narrow beams. More importantly, Day had served in Earth's military during the worst conflicts in human history. He had learned that in real combat, the warrior who made the most noise was usually the most scared. The truly dangerous fighters were the quiet ones who watched and waited for the right moment to strike. Vex continued his intimidation display by hurling small rocks down at the human. Each stone was thrown with enough force to break bones, but Day simply stepped aside at the last second, making it look easy. The human never took his eyes off his opponent and never showed any sign of fear or anger. This calm response made Vex even angrier. He had expected the human to cower or beg for mercy. Instead, Day was treating him like he was not even a threat. The alien warrior began throwing larger rocks, some the size of basketballs, but the human avoided each one with minimal effort. The crowd began to notice that something was different about this human. He moved in a way that seemed almost supernatural. His feet found solid ground, even when the terrain looked impossible to navigate. He never stumbled or lost his balance, even when dodging the heavy projectiles that Vex threw at him. Some of the more experienced warriors in the audience started paying closer attention. They had seen enough fights to recognize real skill when they saw it. The human was not just lucky or fast. He was reading his opponent's movements and predicting where each attack would come from. Ambassador Kim felt a small spark of hope as he watched Day perform. His daughter, Hana, was also fascinated by the way the human moved. She thought he looked like a dancer, avoiding all the falling rocks with smooth, graceful steps that made it look like a game, rather than a life-or-death struggle. But Vex was far from finished with his display of dominance. He decided to escalate his intimidation tactics by targeting not just the human fighter, but all humans in general. He began shouting insults about Earth and its people, calling them a disease that needed to be wiped out from the galaxy. The alien warrior's words grew more cruel and vicious with each passing moment. He described humans as parasites who would contaminate the pure species of the galaxy. If they were allowed to join the Galactic Council, he said that Earth should be destroyed before its people could spread their weakness to other worlds. These harsh words carried clearly through the arena's sound system, reaching every spectator, including little Hana. The 8-year-old girl did not understand all the big words, but she understood that the scary lizard creature was saying terrible things about her and her family. Tears began to form in Hana's eyes as she listened to the cruel speech. She pressed her stuffed bear closer to her chest and looked up at her father with confusion and hurt. Ambassador Kim put his arm around his daughter and whispered that everything would be okay, but inside he was furious at the unprovoked attack on his people. The other human diplomats in the VIP section looked uncomfortable and angry. Several of them stood up as if they wanted to leave, but Ambassador Kim signaled for them to stay. He knew that walking away would be seen as surrender and would make things even worse for Earth down in the arena. Day continued to stand calmly in the center of the rocky terrain, but something had changed in his posture. He was still relaxed and controlled, but there was a new intensity in his eyes. The cruel words about his species and the sight of the frightened little girl in the audience had awakened something deep inside him. Vex noticed the change and mistook it for fear. He thought his psychological warfare was finally working, and that the human was beginning to crack under the pressure. The alien warrior decided it was time to end this pathetic display and show the galaxy what happened to those who dared challenge the mighty Sauroch. What Vex did not realize was that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He had threatened and insulted not just a human warrior, but an entire species, including their children. And there were few things in the universe more dangerous than a human who felt that innocent people were being threatened. The official start of the match was announced by a loud horn that echoed throughout the arena. The crowd fell silent for just a moment before erupting into cheers and roars of excitement. Everyone expected this to be over quickly, and they wanted to see their champion destroy the weak human in spectacular fashion. Vex immediately put his climbing advantage to good use. He scaled the tallest rock formation and began hurling massive boulders down at Day. These were not small stones like before, but huge chunks of rock that weighed hundreds of pounds. Each boulder could easily crush a normal person into paste. The sound of the falling rocks was like thunder as they crashed into the arena floor where Day had been standing. But somehow, the human was never there when the rocks landed. He moved with an almost impossible grace, sliding between the projectiles like water flowing around obstacles. What amazed the crowd was how effortless Day made it look. He did not run or jump frantically, like most fighters would. Instead, he walked calmly from spot to spot, always arriving at the safe location just before the boulder smashed into the ground. His movements were so smooth that it looked like he was dancing rather than fighting for his life. This frustrated Vex beyond belief. He had expected the human to either be crushed immediately or to panic and make stupid mistakes. Instead, Day was making him look foolish by avoiding every attack without even breathing hard. The alien warrior had never faced an opponent who showed so little fear. Vex decided to change tactics and leap down from his high position, landing on the arena floor with enough force to crack the stone beneath his feet. He began pursuing Day directly, using his superior size and strength to try to corner the human against the rock walls. But even on flat ground, Day continued to frustrate his opponent. The human seemed to know exactly where Vex would be before the alien got there. It was like Day could read the future and was always one step ahead of every attack. The alien warrior's massive claws whistled through empty air again and again. The crowd was beginning to murmur among themselves. Some of the more experienced fighters were starting to realize that this human possessed skills they had never seen before. He was not just lucky or fast. He was demonstrating a level of tactical awareness that impressed even the veterans as the minutes passed. Vex grew more and more angry. His carefully planned intimidation display was failing completely. The human refused to show fear and was making the mighty Sarok warrior look clumsy and slow. This was not how things were supposed to go in his growing rage. Vex began to make mistakes. He attacked more, wildly and with less precision. His movements became predictable as anger clouded his judgment. The calm human continued to avoid every strike while studying his opponent with those steady dark eyes. Then Vex made his first truly serious error, began taunting not just Day but all of humanity. His voice carried across the arena as he described humans as a plague that needed to be eliminated from the galaxy. He called them soft, weak creatures who had no right to exist among real warriors. Alien Warrior went into graphic detail about how he would destroy not just Day, but every human he could find. He promised to personally travel to Earth and show its people what real strength looked like. His words grew more cruel and vicious with each passing moment. These insults were broadcast throughout the arena and reached every human in the VIP section, including little Hana, who was trying to understand why this scary creature was saying such terrible things about her family and her home. The 8-year-old girl's eyes filled with tears as the harsh words continued. Ambassador Kim held his daughter close, trying to comfort her, while fighting his own anger at the unprovoked verbal assault. Other human diplomats looked ready to storm down to the arena floor, but they knew that would only make things worse for their species. Reputation. Down on the fighting ground, Day heard every word of the cruel speech. His expression remained calm, but something fundamental had changed in his body language. He stood straighter, and his muscles tensed slightly, like a coiled spring waiting to be released. Seeing the tears in the little girl's eyes seemed to affect him more than all the personal insults combined. Day had spent his military career protecting innocent people, and the sight of a frightened child awakened every protective instinct he possessed. But Vex was not finished with his cruelty. The alien warrior had noticed the effect his words were having on the humans in the audience and decided to escalate his psychological warfare. He wanted to break their spirit completely before finishing off their pathetic representative in a move that shocked everyone in the arena. Vex suddenly abandoned the fight entirely. He used his incredible jumping ability to leap from the rocky terrain directly toward the VIP section where the human diplomats sat. The distance was enormous, but the powerful alien warrior covered it in a single bound arena security move to intercept him, but Vex was too fast and too strong. He landed on the edge of the VIP section and began pushing his way through the startled alien spectators who scrambled to get out of his path. His target was clear. He was heading straight for the human section ambassador. Kim stood up and moved to shield his daughter, but he was just a diplomat, not a trained fighter. Vex was a seasoned warrior who had killed dozens of opponents in single combat. There was no way an ordinary human could stop him. The massive alien warrior reached the human section and loomed over the terrified diplomats. His yellow eyes focused on little Hana, who was clutching her stuffed bear and crying from fear. Vex raised one of his enormous clawed hands high above his head. His intention was crystal clear to everyone in the arena. He was going to strike the human child. Not to kill her because that would cause too many political problems, but to slap her hard enough to humiliate all of humanity. The message would be unmistakable: humans could not even protect their own young. The crowd held its breath as they realized what was about to happen. Some of the aliens looked uncomfortable with this development because even the most warlike species had codes about not harming children. But Vex was beyond caring about such niceties. Time seemed to slow down as the massive clawed hand began to descend toward the frightened little girl. Ambassador Kim lunged forward desperately, trying to reach his daughter in time, but he was too far away and too slow. Other humans in the section moved to help, but they were all ordinary diplomats and scientists. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. Far below on the arena floor, Day saw the threat to the child, and every calculation, every calm strategy, every patient plan disappeared from his mind. In its place came something far more primitive and infinitely more dangerous. The protective instinct that had kept humanity alive through ice ages and wars and countless predators, awakened fully for the first time since humans had reached the stars. Day was no longer just a construction engineer or even a former soldier. He became something that the galaxy had never seen before. He became a human parent, protecting a human child. The transformation was visible even from the distant VIP section. Daya's entire body language changed. His calm, relaxed posture vanished and was replaced by something that looked far more dangerous. Every muscle in his body coiled like a spring, and his dark eyes blazed with an intensity that made several nearby aliens step backward. What happened next would be talked about throughout the galaxy for generations. The moment that Vex's hand began its descent toward little Hana was the moment that the alien species of the galaxy learned their first real lesson about humanity. They learned that there are few things in the universe more dangerous than a human who believes that innocent people are in danger. And they were about to discover that all their assumptions about human weakness and frailty were not just wrong, but catastrophically mistaken. The 3 seconds that followed would change everything. The first second began the moment Vex clawed hand started moving toward little Hana. In that instant, something happened to Day that no alien species in the galaxy had ever witnessed before. Every human in the arena felt it too, even though they could not put it into words. It was like electricity running through their bodies, awakening something ancient and powerful. Down on the arena floor, Day moved faster than physics should have allowed. The calm, patient engineer disappeared completely and was replaced by something that belonged in humanity's most primitive past, when their ancestors fought cave bears and saber-toothed tigers with nothing but stone tools and raw determination. His legs launched him upward with explosive force that cracked the stone beneath his feet. The muscles that had been built by years of carrying steel beams and working in construction sites now propelled him through the air like a human rocket. Every fiber of his being was focused on a single goal: reaching the child before harm could come to her. The aliens in the crowd gasped in shock as they saw the human cover impossible distances in a heartbeat. He moved in a straight line through the air, ignoring gravity and physics, as if they were merely suggestions. His trajectory was perfect and unwavering, aimed directly at the massive Sauroch warrior who threatened the innocent ambassador. Kim watched in amazement as Day flew through the air toward them. The diplomat had never seen anything like it in his life. No human should be able to move that fast or jump that high, but somehow this ordinary construction worker was defying every law of nature. The other humans in the VIP section felt something stir in their own bodies as they watched. Day. It was like an echo of the same power that drove him an ancient memory written into their DNA from millions of years of evolution. They felt stronger and braver just watching their representative become something magnificent, even the alien. Spectators could sense that something fundamental had changed. The air itself seemed to vibrate with energy, and many of the more sensitive species began backing away from the human section without understanding why their instincts were warning them that they were witnessing something dangerous. The second began as Day reached the edge of the VIP section, moving faster than a speeding car. The impact when he collided with Vex was like two trains crashing into each other. The sound echoed throughout the entire arena, making the crystal walls ring like giant bells. Vex's massive body, which had seemed so intimidating and powerful, suddenly looked fragile compared to the force that hit him. Day struck the alien warrior in the center of his armored chest, with his shoulder driving all the air from Vex's lungs and lifting the 9-foot-tall creature completely off his feet. The Sauroch warrior had expected to slap a defenseless child and return triumphantly to the arena floor. Instead, he found himself grappled by someone whose strength had been multiplied by pure protective rage. Day wrapped his arms around Vex's torso with a grip that could bend steel for the first time in his life. Vex felt real fear. The human was smaller than him and should have been weaker, but the strength in those arms was beyond anything he had ever encountered. It was like being grabbed by a machine designed for crushing metal. The alien's natural armor began to crack under the pressure. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the human completely dominated their champion. Vex tried to use his claws to strike back, but Day had positioned himself perfectly to avoid the alien's weapons. The construction worker's knowledge of leverage and physics turned Vex's own size and weight against him. What the aliens could not understand was that they were not just watching a fight. They were witnessing the awakening of humanity's most ancient and powerful instinct, the drive to protect their young. This was the same force that had allowed primitive humans to kill creatures 10 times their size when their children were threatened. The third second began as Day completed what would become known throughout the galaxy as the drop, using Vex's own momentum. And adding his construction-trained strength, the human spun the massive alien around like he was handling a piece of building equipment. Every muscle in Dai's body worked together with perfect coordination gained from years of dangerous physical labor. His hands found the exact right grip, his feet planted in the perfect position, and his core muscles engaged to provide maximum power. The movement was flawless and devastating. The watching aliens could not believe what they were seeing. The human was handling their greatest warrior like he was made of paper. Vex, who had defeated champions from dozens of species, was helpless in the grip of this seemingly ordinary Earth person, with a technique that would be studied by military experts. For generations, Day drove the alien warrior headfirst toward the arena floor from 30 feet above the ground. The descent was controlled and precise, ensuring maximum impact while avoiding any chance that Vex could recover or escape. The sound when Vex hit the arena floor was like thunder. The entire building shook from the impact and cracks appeared in the stone surface where the alien landed. His natural armor, which had protected him in hundreds of battles, shattered like glass under. The tremendous force dust and debris flew everywhere as the two bodies crashed into the ground. Day landed in a perfect crouch, his construction worker balance keeping him upright, while Vex lay motionless beside him. The contrast was striking. The human looked ready to continue fighting, while the alien looked like he might never fight again. The arena fell into complete and total silence. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed to breathe. The only sound was the settling of dust and the distant hum of the arena's machinery. Even the announcer's jellyfish-like form had stopped pulsing with light and hung motionless in the air. Every alien in the crowd was trying to process what they had just witnessed. Their entire understanding of humanity had been shattered in 3 seconds. The weak, fragile, pink-skinned creatures they had mocked were apparently capable of incredible violence when properly motivated. Medical teams rushed onto the arena floor, but they moved cautiously, keeping their distance from Day. The human stood over his fallen opponent, breathing heavily, but showing no signs of fatigue. His dark eyes still held that dangerous intensity that had appeared when the child was threatened. The alien medical experts worked quickly to assess Vex's condition. Their scanners showed multiple fractures in his armor and severe damage to his internal organs. The warrior would survive, but his fighting career was definitely over. More importantly, his reputation as an unstoppable champion had been destroyed forever. Ambassador Kim held his daughter tight while staring down at the arena in amazement. The diplomat had always known that humans were tougher than they appeared, but he had never imagined anything like this. Watching Day protect Hana had filled him with a pride he could barely contain. Little Hana stopped crying and looked down at the man who had saved her. She did not fully understand what had happened, but she knew that the nice construction worker had kept her safe from the scary monster. Just like her father did every day, this was simply what humans did for each other. Throughout the arena, alien spectators began looking at the human diplomatic section with new eyes. The granite lords who valued strength, above all else, nodded their massive heads in what might have been approval. Even some of the Sauroch warriors seemed to view the humans differently now. What none of them realized was that they had just witnessed only a tiny fraction of humanity's true potential. When their children were threatened, humans could become something far more dangerous than any single warrior. They could become an entire species united in protection of the innocent. The 3-second war was over, but its effects would ripple through the galaxy for generations to come. The silence that followed the 3-second war was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. Thousands of alien beings sat frozen in their seats, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The most feared warrior in the Sauroch Empire lay broken on the arena floor, while a human construction worker stood over him calmly. Slowly, the reality of what had happened began to sink into the crowd. The weak, pathetic humans they had been mocking just moments before had produced a warrior, capable of defeating their greatest champion in less time than it took to blink. And he had done it not for glory or conquest, but to protect a small child. The medical teams worked frantically around Vex's unconscious form. Their advanced scanners revealed the full extent of the damage. The alien's natural armor was cracked in 17 places. His spine had 3 compression fractures, and several of his internal organs were severely damaged. He would live, but he would never be the same. What shocked the medical experts even more was the precision of the injuries. Every fracture, every break, had been calculated to disable without killing. This was not the work of a berserker or someone lost in bloodlust. This was the result of perfect control and technical expertise applied with devastating efficiency. Day stood motionless beside his fallen opponent, his breathing slowly returning to normal. The dangerous intensity in his eyes was fading, replaced by his usual calm expression. He made no victory gestures, no triumphant roars. He simply looked up at the VIP section to make sure little Hana was safe. Ambassador Kim felt tears running down his face as he held his daughter. The pride he felt was overwhelming. Not just pride in Day, but pride in his entire species. They had all felt something awakened when the child was threatened, something that connected them to their most ancient heritage. The other human diplomats in the VIP section were experiencing similar emotions. They looked at each other with new understanding, recognizing that they were part of something much stronger and more dangerous than they had ever realized. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, but they had underestimated themselves as well. Little. Hana stopped trembling and looked down at Day with wide, curious eyes. She waved at him shyly, and the construction worker smiled back, giving her a small wave in return. To the 8-year-old girl, this was simply what adults did when children were in danger. It was as natural as breathing. The arena officials were in complete chaos. The match had technically ended the moment Vex was incapacitated, but nothing like this had ever happened before in the history of the championship. No fighter had ever left the designated combat area to protect spectators, and certainly not with such overwhelming force. The floating jellyfish announcer began pulsing with confused colors as it tried to decide what to say. The rules clearly stated that Day had won the match, but the manner of victory was so unprecedented that no one knew how to react. The crowd waited in tense silence for some kind of official response. Throughout the arena, individual aliens began to react in different ways. Some of the younger Sarok warriors looked at Day with something approaching respect. They understood strength when they saw it, and what the human had displayed was strength of the highest order. The hive minds were clicking rapidly among themselves, trying to process this new information about human capabilities. Their collective intelligence was struggling to reconcile their previous assumptions with the evidence of their own sensors. The humans were clearly not what they had appeared to be. The massive granite lords rumbled deep sounds of approval. These ancient beings valued the protection of the innocent above all other virtues. What Day had done resonated with their deepest cultural beliefs. They began to see humans in an entirely new light, but it was not just the physical demonstration that impressed the aliens. It was the motivation behind it. Day had not fought for personal glory or territorial conquest. He had acted purely to protect someone who could not protect herself. This was a concept that many warrior cultures respected, but few actually practiced. The arena security teams approached Day cautiously, unsure how to handle the situation. The human made no threatening moves and actually stepped back from Vex to give the medical teams more room. His body language showed no aggression, only a quiet alertness that suggested he was ready to act again. If necessary, news of the fight was already spreading beyond the arena. The match had been broadcast live throughout the galaxy, and footage of Dayes' 3-second victory was being transmitted to every major system within hours. Beings across countless worlds stopped what they were doing to watch the impossible scene. Military analysts from dozens of species began studying the footage frame by frame, trying to understand how such a feat had been possible. The speed, the precision, the devastating effectiveness of the attack all defied their previous understanding of human physical capabilities. But there was something else in the footage that troubled many observers. It was not just that Day had moved faster and hit harder than expected. It was the complete transformation in his demeanor. The calm, patient engineer had become something primal and terrifying. In the space of a heartbeat, scientists throughout the galaxy began researching human biology and psychology with new urgency. What they discovered challenged every assumption they had made about Earth people. Humans possess something called hysterical strength, the ability to exceed their normal physical limitations when protecting loved ones. This biological mechanism, combined with humanity's evolutionary history as persistence hunters and tool users, created a species that was far more dangerous than their peaceful appearance suggested. They were not weak. They were simply choosing not to show their strength until it was needed. The Galactic Council, which had been hesitant about human membership, suddenly found themselves facing a completely different situation. A species capable of such dedication to protecting innocence, combined with the tactical intelligence Day had displayed, might be exactly what their organization needed on the arena floor. Day finally moved away from his unconscious opponent and began walking toward the exit. His part in this was finished, and he wanted to return to his quiet life building things and helping people. The galaxy could make whatever decisions it wanted about his species, but as he walked, the crowd began to react. The silence broke as individual aliens started making sounds of approval. Some clapped in their various ways, while others roared or clicked or rumbled, depending on their biology. The approval was not universal, but it was significant. Sauroch warriors in particular seemed divided. Some were angry that their champion had been defeated so decisively. Others, however, were impressed by the display of protective instinct. Something about Daia's willingness to risk everything for a child resonated with their own warrior code. By the time Day reached the exit tunnel, the entire arena was buzzing with conversation. Every species was debating what they had witnessed and what it meant for their relationship with humanity. The humans were, clearly, not the weak prey animals they had appeared to be. Ambassador Kim made his way down from the VIP section with Hana in his arms. He wanted to thank Day personally for protecting his daughter. When they met in the corridor beneath the arena, the construction worker simply nodded and said that any human would have done the same thing. This statement would be remembered and quoted throughout the galaxy for years to come. The idea that protecting children was so natural to humans that any of them would react the same way added another layer to the growing legend. Little Hana gave Day a hug and thanked him for keeping her safe. She offered him her stuffed bear as a present, but he gently told her to keep it. The simple interaction between the warrior and the child he had protected became one of the most famous images in galactic history. As news of the fight continued to spread, reactions poured in from across the known worlds. Some species expressed newfound respect for humanity, while others worried about what this display of hidden strength might mean for future relations. The 3-second war had ended, but its consequences were just beginning. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again, and humanity would never see themselves as helpless victims in a universe full of stronger species. They had learned that when pushed to their limits, when innocent lives were threatened, they could become something magnificent and terrible. Something that even the mightiest alien warriors would respect and fear. In the days and weeks that followed the 3-second war, the entire galaxy began to change its opinion about humanity. The footage of Daia's impossible leap and devastating takedown of Commander Vex spread through every system like wildfire. Beings who had never heard of Earth before suddenly found themselves watching and re-watching the incredible scene. Military academies across dozens of worlds added the fight to their curriculum as an example of perfect tactical execution. The way Day had used Vex's own size and momentum against him became a textbook example of how intelligence could overcome brute force. Students of many species studied the footage trying to understand the principles behind the technique. But it was not just the physical aspects of the fight that captured galactic attention. The motivation behind Dai's actions proved even more fascinating to alien psychologists and philosophers. A warrior who fought not for personal glory, but purely to protect an innocent child was something many cultures could respect. Earth physiologists were called upon to explain how such a feat had been possible. They described something called hysterical strength, a biological mechanism that allowed humans to access reserves of power normally kept locked away. This ability had evolved to help parents protect their young during life-threatening situations. The scientists explained that human muscles were normally restricted to about 30% of their maximum potential to prevent injury. But when the brain detected extreme danger to loved ones, especially children, these restrictions could be completely removed for short periods, combined with humanity's evolutionary history as endurance hunters who chased prey across vast distances for days at a time. This created a species with hidden reserves of strength and determination that few other beings possessed. Humans were not weak. They simply kept their true capabilities in reserve. The Galactic Council found themselves facing a completely different situation than they had expected. Instead of debating whether to allow a weak species to join their organization, they were now considering how to properly integrate beings who possessed such incredible protective instincts. The council members realized that humanity offered something their organization desperately needed. Every species in the galaxy seemed focused on conquest, expansion, and dominance, but humans had demonstrated something far more valuable: the willingness to risk everything to protect innocence. This revelation came at a perfect time for the galactic community. Pirates and raiders had been growing bolder in recent years, attacking peaceful worlds and enslaving populations. The existing military forces were powerful, but they were designed for large-scale battles, not for protecting civilians. A species that would fight with desperate fury to protect children from any world could provide exactly the kind of deterrent effect the Council needed. The pirates might not fear conventional military forces, but they would think twice about attacking worlds protected by beings who became terrifyingly dangerous when innocents were threatened. Commander Vex recovered from his injuries, but his fighting career was over. The damage to his spine meant he would never again possess the speed and agility that had made him famous. His reputation as an unstoppable champion had been shattered along with his armor, but something unexpected happened during his recovery. Vex requested to meet with Day privately. The encounter took place in a neutral medical facility with no cameras or recording devices present. What they discussed remained secret, but both emerged from the meeting changed. Vex publicly apologized for his threats against human civilians and requested permission to visit Earth to study human defensive tactics. He claimed that Day had taught him something important about the difference between true strength and mere brutality. Other Saurak warriors began expressing similar interest in human fighting methods. They had always respected strength, but Dai's display had shown them a kind of power they had never encountered before. The idea of becoming stronger to protect others, rather than to dominate them, was revolutionary. The hive minds with their collective intelligence were among the first to truly understand the implications of human protective instincts. They calculated that a species willing to die for their young would be incredibly difficult to defeat in any long-term conflict. Such beings would never surrender as long as children remained at risk. The ancient granite lords who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations saw something special in humanity's response to threat. They began sharing stories from their own history about species that had survived impossible odds through the power of parental love. Little Hannah became something of a galactic celebrity, though she never fully understood why alien children from across the known worlds sent her gifts and messages of friendship. Her simple act of being protected had somehow made her a symbol of innocence worth defending. Ambassador Kim found his job much easier, as aliens, who had previously dismissed humanity, now treated Earth delegates with newfound respect. The image of his daughter being shielded by Deia's sacrifice had touched something deep in many species' understanding of family.